Adriano. They called him the Emperor, a 6'2" Brazilian powerhouse, with a left foot so lethal it could break nets. At just 22, Adriano Leite Ribeiro wasn't just scoring goals for Inter Milan, he was destroying defenders. In 2004 and 2005, he was untouchable, blasting in goals from 30 yards, bulldozing through backlines, and leading Brazil to Copa America glory. Italy believed they were witnessing the next Ronaldo Nazario, but behind the celebration dances and roaring crowds, something was breaking. That same year, Adriano's father, the man who had guided him out of Rio's favelas and into the football elite, died suddenly, and with him, so did Adriano's joy for the game. Teammates noticed the change. The unstoppable striker started showing up to training drunk. Nights in Milan turned into weeks back in Brazil, drowning his grief in alcohol. Inter tried to cover it up, telling the press he was injured, but fans could see the truth. The Emperor was falling. Adriano later admitted, "I drank everything I could get my hands on. Wine, whiskey, vodka, beer. I didn't stop drinking." The fitness faded. The sharpness vanished. By 2009, at just 27, the man who was meant to dominate a generation was gone from European football, trading San Siro's lights for the shadows of his old neighborhood. And the saddest part? He knew exactly what happened. "I am the biggest waste in football," Adriano once wrote, a chilling confession from a player who had it all but couldn't outrun his own grief. The Emperor's reign was short, but the fall was absolute. Mario Balotelli. He had it all: strength, speed, technique, the arrogance of a man who believed he was destined for greatness. By 20, Mario Balotelli had already won the Champions League with Inter Milan, lifted the Premier League trophy with Manchester City, and been crowned Europe's golden boy. When asked who was better than him, Balotelli replied, "Only Messi. All the others are behind me." And on his day, you believed him. Euro 2012, semi-final against Germany. 2 goals. One, a thunderbolt into the top corner. He ripped his shirt off, stood like a statue, muscles flexed, the image of a man born for the big stage. But Balotelli's career wasn't defined by those moments of brilliance. It was defined by the chaos in between. The dart-throwing incident at a youth player, driving into a women's prison just to have a look, setting off fireworks in his bathroom, setting the place on fire, then scoring the next day, while revealing the now iconic shirt, "Why always me?" Managers pleaded with him to focus. Jose Mourinho told him before a game with all other strikers injured not to get booked. Balotelli lasted 46 minutes before a red card. He fought with teammates, clashed with coaches, and let his fitness slip. The goals became rarer, the headlines stranger. Zlatan Ibrahimovic summed it up. Balotelli had so many opportunities, and he missed them all. A career that should have been filled with Ballon d'Or nominations became a scrapbook of wasted potential and tabloid scandals. Mario Balotelli could have been a legend. Instead, he became the answer to a very different question. Why always him? Ravel Morrison. Sir Alex Ferguson nurtured Cristiano Ronaldo. He made Ryan Giggs a legend. He watched Paul Scholes dominate midfields for decades. But when asked about the most naturally gifted player he'd ever signed, Sir Alex didn't name any of them. He said one name: Ravel Morrison. A Manchester United Academy product with vision, balance, and the ability to glide past players like they weren't even there. Wayne Rooney swore Morrison was better than Pogba, better than Lingard, by a country mile. Gary Neville compared him to Paul Gascoigne. This wasn't hype. In the 2011 FA Youth Cup, surrounded by future stars, Morrison was the one stealing the show. But there was another side to Ravel's life, the side United couldn't control. He grew up in one of Manchester's roughest neighborhoods, surrounded by the wrong influences. By his late teens, Morrison was already in court, convicted of intimidating a witness at knife point, charged with assault, constantly in trouble. United tried everything. Ferguson moved him into Rio Ferdinand's house to keep him away from trouble. He was given chance after chance, until even Sir Alex admitted defeat, calling him the saddest case he'd ever seen. West Ham took him in. Lazio tried to revive him. But the story was always the same: flashes of genius, then disappearance. That wonder goal against Tottenham in 2013? It was supposed to be the start of something. Instead, it became a lonely highlight in a career of what-ifs. Years later, Morrison admitted, "I didn't work hard enough. If I could go back, there's a lot I'd change. But football doesn't wait." The most talented kid Manchester United ever had is now a drifter, his legend existing only in training ground stories and the memories of those who saw what could have been. Jack Wilshshire. In 2011, an 18-year-old Jack Wilshshire walked onto the pitch against Barcelona, Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets, and ran the game. He wasn't intimidated. He wasn't overawed. He was the best midfielder on the pitch. Xavi himself said he has everything to be one of the best in the world. Wilshire is the future of English football. And for a moment, it felt true. Arsène Wenger called him the complete footballer, a rare mix of Spanish technique and English grit. He could glide past a man with a quick touch, thread the perfect pass, and throw himself into tackles like his life depended on it. Arsenal fans thought they'd found their new captain. England thought they'd found their new leader. But then came the injuries. First, a stress fracture in his ankle. Then another, and another. Every time Wilshire came back, another part of his body betrayed him. Ankle, knee, foot, a never-ending cycle of surgery and rehab. Wenger admitted it himself. I'm sad because at the top level, the most important thing is consistency, and Jack was stopped by injuries over and over again. There were moments, flashes of the old Wilshire. That volley against Norwich, that run through Manchester City's midfield. But they were brief. The fitness never held, the rhythm never returned. By 28, Wilshire was training alone, without a club. At 30, he retired a career that should have been remembered for lifting trophies, instead remembered for what it could have been. Jack Wilshire didn't lose his talent. He lost the one thing no player can live without: time. Alexandre Pato. When Alexandre Pato arrived at AC Milan at just 18 years old, it felt like the start of a dynasty. He scored on his Serie A debut. He scored on his Coppa Italia debut. He scored on his Champions League debut. By 20, he was Europe's golden boy, and in his own head, he was already holding the Ballon d'Or. And you could see why. Pato had that devastating combination of raw pace and Brazilian flair. Defenders knew the moment he pushed the ball past them, they'd already lost. His goal against Barcelona at the Camp Nou in 2011, a 12-second sprint straight from kickoff, finishing before anyone could touch him, made even Pep Guardiola shake his head in disbelief. But then the injuries came. Hamstring tears, ankle problems, muscle pulls, and the worst part, they never stopped. Every time Pato came back, another injury followed. He admitted later, I started training thinking, I can't get injured. And then I played with a swollen ankle just to please everyone. The fear crept in. The confidence drained away. By 23, the boy who was supposed to rule Europe had left Milan to return to Brazil and rebuild. He had flashes of the old magic, but the spark that made him unstoppable was gone. A brief spell at Chelsea passed almost unnoticed. The Ballon d'Or dream faded into a long list of clubs and leagues, each a reminder of what should have been. Alexandre Pato was meant to be the next great Brazilian striker. Instead, he became a symbol of how quickly injuries can turn a king into a footnote. Bojan Krkić. At 17, Bojan Krkić wasn't just Barcelona's next big thing, he was the thing. He had scored over 900 goals in La Masia's youth teams, breaking records set by Lionel Messi himself. The Spanish press crowned him El Nuevo Messi. The comparisons were relentless. The expectations were crushing. And at first, he delivered. A Champions League debut within weeks. A goal in his very first season that made him the youngest scorer in Barcelona's history. He was fearless, weaving through defenders, finishing with icy calm. Bojan was supposed to be the next jewel in Barça A's crown. But what the world didn't know was that Bojan was suffocating. Behind the smile and the hype, he was battling crippling anxiety. At 17, on the day he was set to debut for Spain, he suffered a panic attack in the dressing room. The Federation told the press it was gastroenteritis. Months later, he withdrew from Spain's Euro 2008 squad officially, exhaustion, but in truth, he simply couldn't cope. My body said, stop, Bojan later admitted. Football didn't stop for him though. Barcelona kept winning, Spain kept winning, and Bojan kept drifting further from the spotlight. Lone spells in Italy, England, the Netherlands, flashes of quality, but never the dominance expected from the next Messi. If you compare me with Messi, what career did you expect? He said years later, his voice tinged with both pride and regret. Bojan Krkic's career was not a failure, but it was never allowed to be his own. It belonged to the shadow of a legend he could never escape. Hatem Ben Arfa. From the first time Hatem Ben Arfa touched the ball, you could tell this wasn't just talent, this was magic. As a teenager at Olympique Lyonnais, he came through alongside Karim Benzema, and some swore Ben Arfa was the better of the two. The close control, the impossible dribbles, the goals that left defenders spinning, he had it all. Coaches called him a rare pearl. Fans called him a future Ballon d'Or. And sometimes he looked every bit of it. Those solo goals for Newcastle, slaloming through half the opposition, the 17-goal season at Nice that brought him back into the French national team. On his day, Ben Arfa could humiliate the very best. Messi himself once praised his technique. But there was another side to the story. The side that refused to track back. The side that clashed with almost every coach he ever had. The side that, when told to work harder for the team, would smirk and say, "You don't ask a future Ballon d'Or to defend." From Lyon to Marseille, Newcastle to PSG, the pattern was the same. Moments of brilliance, followed by months of frustration. At Hull City, he vanished mid-loan and flew back to France without permission. At PSG, he was frozen out for an entire season after falling out with management. By the time he was 35, Ben Arfa had burned bridges at nearly every club he played for. His old agent summed it up. Hatem could have been the biggest player of his generation. Instead, he's the biggest waste of the 21st century. Hatem Ben Arfa's career will live forever on YouTube highlight reels. But legends aren't made on flashes, they're made on consistency. And that was the one thing he never had. Antonio Cassano. At 17 years old, Antonio Cassano scored one of the most famous goals in Serie A history. Playing for Bari against Inter Milan, he controlled a long ball, danced past two defenders, and slotted it home like he'd been doing it all his life. Italy thought they'd found their new Roberto Baggio, and for a while, it looked true. At Roma, alongside Francesco Totti, Cassano's vision and technique were breathtaking. No-look passes, delicate chips, the kind of creativity that made defenders freeze. Real Madrid came calling, and by 23, Cassano was a Galactico, il gioiello di Bari Vecchia, the jewel of old Bari. But brilliance was only half of Cassano's story. The other half? Volcanic temperament, endless feuds, self-destruction. He insulted Fabio Capello to his face at Madrid, called him names, and found himself benched for months. At Sampdoria, he swore at the club president during an argument and was suspended. He turned up overweight more than once, admitting he sometimes gained over 15 kilos in a season. And off the pitch, the stories were just as wild, endless nights out, bragging about women and pastries with the same grin he wore after scoring a goal. Cassano himself later admitted, "I am the greatest talent to have thrown everything away." And he wasn't wrong. For all the flashes of genius, the outside of the foot passes, the cheeky chips over world-class goalkeepers, the consistency was never there. Antonio Cassano could have been Italy's Maradona. Instead, he became Italy's cautionary tale, proof that talent alone isn't enough to make a legend. Nicolas Bentner. Nicolas Bentner didn't just believe he could be one of the best strikers in the world, he said it, out loud. "If you ask me if I'm one of the best strikers in the world, I say yes, because I believe it," he told reporters in 2010, and for a while, it seemed that confidence might actually be justified. Coming through Arsenal's academy, Bentner had the size, the touch, and the knack for big goals. A record-breaking 1.8-second goal against Tottenham in the North London derby. A Champions League hat-trick against Porto. Key strikes for Denmark at Euro 2012. He was tall, strong, good in the air, and technically sharp for his size. The perfect modern target man. But the legend of Lord Bentner didn't come from his football. It came from everything else. There was the arrest for smashing up parked cars in Newcastle. The €100,000 UEFA fine for revealing sponsored underwear during a goal celebration. The bizarre incident with a taxi driver in Copenhagen that ended with him in court for assault. At Juventus, he showed up overweight and didn't score a single goal. At Arsenal, Wenger's patience wore thin as Bentner's nightlife and poor discipline took over. Soon, the meme replaced the man. Lord Bentner became an internet icon, a running joke about a striker who thought he was world-class but couldn't back it up on the pitch. Years later, he admitted to losing millions to gambling and struggling to find purpose once the spotlight faded. Nicolas Bentner will be remembered just not as the legend he thought he'd be. Instead, he's football's ultimate reminder that self-belief without discipline is just arrogance waiting to implode. Dele Alli. The €100,000 UEFA fine for revealing sponsored underwear during a goal celebration. At 20 years old, Dele Alli was unstoppable. PFA Young Player of the Year. 18 goals from midfield for Tottenham. Nutmegging Luka Modric at the Bernabeu. Scoring twice against Real Madrid in the Champions League. By 21, he had more Premier League goals than Lampard, Gerrard, or Beckham at the same age. He was supposed to be England's new number 10, the man to lead a generation. On the pitch, he had it all. Late runs into the box that defenders couldn't track. A cheeky flick over a defender followed by a volley that became one of the league's most replayed goals. A deadly partnership with Harry Kane. It felt like Dele Alli's rise would never stop. But then, it did. Form dipped. Minutes dried up. Jose Mourinho asked him in training, "Are you Dele or Dele's brother?" The public assumed it was laziness or fame getting to his head. The truth was far darker. In 2023, Dele revealed he'd been sexually abused as a child, that he'd fallen into sleeping pill addiction to escape the trauma, that by 24, he was seriously considering retiring from football altogether. I was escaping from reality. I lost myself for a few years, he admitted. The smile we saw on the pitch was hiding a private war he was losing. Everton, basic tis, the moves came, but the magic never fully returned. At 27, he was still fighting to find himself again, on and off the pitch. Dele Alli's story is still being written. But for now, it stands as a sobering reminder. Sometimes, a fallen star's biggest battle isn't with form or injury. It's with the demons nobody sees. Robinho. When Pelé calls you his successor, the world listens. At 18, Robinho was already dazzling at Santos stepovers so quick they blurred, the pedaladas that left defenders in knots. He led Santos to 2 league titles, just like Pelé had done decades earlier. By 21, he was a Galactico at Real Madrid. The samba flair, the goals, the smile, Robinho looked like Brazil's next great superstar. And for a while, he lived up to it. La Liga titles with Madrid, Copa America glory with Brazil, a big money move to Manchester City as their first marquee signing of the new era. On his day, he was unplayable, turning defenders inside out, making the game look like a street performance. But the cracks came fast. At City, he grew unhappy, missing home and skipping training. The move back to Brazil was supposed to revive him instead. It marked the start of a long decline. AC Milan, Guangzhou, Atletico Mineiro, the star power faded. The work rate was never there. The hunger seemed gone. And then came the scandal that destroyed his legacy. In 2017, Robinho was convicted by an Italian court of participating in the gang rape of a woman in Milan in 2013. He denied it, appealed, but the conviction was upheld. 9 years in prison. Brazil refused to extradite him, but his name was finished. Sponsors fled. Santos dropped him after public outrage. The boy Pelé, once called the best in Brazil, became a cautionary tale, a player who squandered his gift and whose off-field crimes erased the joy he once brought to millions. Robinho's story isn't just about wasted potential, it's about how quickly admiration can turn to disgust, and how no amount of talent can save you from the consequences of your actions. Some of these players had the world at their feet and let it slip away. Others were brought down by tragedy, injuries, or their own choices. But every story leaves the same question: what could they have been? If you enjoyed this deep dive into football's greatest what-ifs, hit that like button, drop a comment with the player you think wasted the most talent, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another story from the dark side of football.